Hey Burns, how's it?
Doing okay, Dick. How about yourself? You feeling any better or still suffering?
Well, I don't know. You claimed last time that you weren't feeling well, and I'm just I heard all over. But now everybody's looking at other reasons, so to speak.
I,
I, I
I'm
I'm just tired of it.
I think I'm on the mend. Now, what that means is I'm going to get back to a point eventually due to antibiotics of being only 90% unhealthy. So
That's that's great. By the way, I had a great week though. Some friends I've known for a long time came, and I'm still trying to get rid of stuff. And so I gave them a 30 or 40-year-old Yokiro Taco Bell stuffed animal that they used to give out as instead of the cheapo toys they give out now. But God, it turns out they're going for like $200. So I gave them that, and I thought that was neat. And then I started inventorying paintings, and I was absolutely horrified how art has appreciated over the last 50 years.
did
But
you give them paintings?
no, no, I
Oh,
still
I was going to say if you're giving away those paintings, I'll get on a plane and come out and see you.
no, no. Well, you can come out and see it, but no, I like the paintings. But I've now started to collect new stuff. You know,
Really?
I thought it'd be really neat. I'm collecting Democratic free stuff. So I went ahead and I ordered my 4 free swabs. I'm going to keep them in the original package, which you're supposed to do. And, 10 years from now, there'll be a member Blabia collector's item. I'm also collecting N95 masks because it turns out I read something in AARP magazine that basically said even surgical masks are only about 30%, maybe 39% effective. And so I'm going, I guess I got to collect a bunch of N95 masks. So I have a whole bunch of those, but I don't wear them because they, they interfere with the cancer.
Did AARP happen to say anything about the designer mask that Nancy Pelosi likes to wear? You know,
Yeah, they're basically the cloth ones.
the ones
they're
that
basically
coordinate
not
with your
effective.
clothing.
No, they're not effective at all.
Yeah, I think it's important to,
Well, I think it's
say that out loud because it's just a charade
no,
what
but
they do in the Congress.
no, but I think it's important that she continue wearing them.
So we don't have to look at her.
Well, if they're not effective and she likes them, hey, you're the guy that likes free choice. If she wants to wear something that has absolutely no effect, I think she has the freedom to do that.
Well, Dick, I don't have a problem with that. What I do have a problem with is when somebody like Nancy Pelosi wants to dictate to us what we must wear. It's none of her damn business. That's not within the province of Congress, I don't believe.
Well, what is it? Boxers or briefs?
Tidy whities.
Oh, okay. Well, anyways, I had to start off with all that energy, because I had a good week, kind of.
That's
And
good.
next week ought to be even more fun.
So what you're saying is your colonoscopy has been put off for a few months.
Well, it's put off because they want it. Well, my immune system shot, so they want to look at that,
Yeah.
and then they want to look at colitis, which is actually good because if you have colitis, you know that stuff you have to drink before a colonoscopy, and you got to drink it until you have a clear.
How could I forget? Yeah.
Okay, well, if you got colitis, you just shoot it out in one batch and you're good to go. And then
Yeah, prune juice.
Yeah, well, actually, I like prune juice, but I haven't had it in years. I like prunes.
Dick, I think this is what they call too much information.
Yeah, well, it's probably true, but, and normally I don't even discuss it, but I'm so tired of stuff that, it just seems to be the way to go. So anyways, I'm collecting free stuff. If you find out of anything, I did not get an Obama phone. My mortgage was not paid for by Obama. So far I haven't gotten anything. I'm waiting for my free test kits.
Yeah, I think Biden's been a little more generous than Obama. But nonetheless, as Democrats are wont to do, anything they're sending to you is touted as being free.
Well, it is.
They might-
It's paid for. It's paid for by the government.
Oh, that's right. It's not taxpayer funded, it's government funded.
Yeah.
Yeah, isn't that interesting? Well, all I can tell you, Dick, is if we're to believe the numbers, 81 million people voted for Joe Biden because they bought into that kind of nonsense.
Oh, am I supposed to say something?
Yeah, it's generally when two people are doing a podcast, yeah, there's a little, we play off of one another.
Oh, okay.
I'll just snap my fingers and maybe you'll come back to consciousness.
Yeah. I don't know. Yeah. So, anyways, that's what's happening.
There are two pieces of good news in the news this week.
Oh.
And I'm glad to report this. England has come to its senses and they've eliminated all COVID-related restrictions. No more mandatory masking, no more mandatory inoculations, no more mandatory social distancing. And on the heels of England doing that, Ireland did it. So there's two examples of Western democracies that have finally shown some sanity, because you know, the people in those two countries are just worn out by 2 years of pandemic-related control by the government. So I've got to give them some applause for coming to their senses and listening to their constituents, something that doesn't happen in our so-called representative government. I hear Fauci, he just announced that he's waiting for the green light to mandate that children under 5 get vaccinated with the COVID vaccine, if you can, you know, if vaccine is the appropriate term. And I think that's, I think parents ought to get their backs up and push back on that. I obviously, anybody looking at me knows I don't have children of that age, but I think parents, much have they had with my applause taken on their school boards over curriculum. I now see a lot of parents of young people pushing back. It's pretty sad. In California, there have been some examples where school districts have literally cordoned off unvaccinated students and basically ostracized them from the vaccinated portion of the classroom, which I think is one of the most mean-spirited things I've ever heard of. Fact is if, as you do and as I do, you have the 2 original shots plus a booster, you're still highly likely going to get Omicron. And if you get it, you can pass it on. You're not protected from it. The best benefit is that you're unlikely to be hospitalized and unlikely to die from it. And that's a benefit, needless to say.
Yeah,
But
well, that's what I think.
yeah, but this notion that the vaccines protect you against contracting the latest variant or of passing it on, you know, the Democrats keep calling this the pandemic of the unvaccinated. That's a load of crap. And it's particularly unfair, disturbingly unfair to try to get young people to believe that they're somehow complicit in the pandemic if they don't get vaccinated and don't follow all the mandates. I mean, can you imagine youngsters having to wear masks? I mean, they even tape them to the kids' faces. Going a whole day with a mask on?
Okay, but what's the alternative to control it?
Oh, I knew you were going to take issue with me.
No, I'm not taking an issue. I'm just saying, okay, Burns, what's the alternative to get this under control?
Every statistic I've heard about, children are not, they may contract it, but the death rate is like 99, is something like 0.1% or less. In other words, getting to school on a bus or getting picked up by your parents and driving back home has a higher risk factor than Omicron.
Well, the interesting thing is, and when I was reading about it, is that the virus is kind of protecting itself, but it's running out of people to infect to protect. So, in other words, you know, it's just running. It's like the old running the gambit. When everybody gets exposed, maybe that's how herd immunity is supposed to work. The problem with that is, though, and everybody's saying it, is do you want to flip a coin and figure you're the one that loses the bet? I mean, would you want to flip a coin with your kids and not get them vaccinated because you don't like it?
I got vaccinated. My wife got vaccinated because of our age, and in my case because I have some chronic health issues. So I followed that guidance, and I would do it again. But when you start talking about, you know, we now have, and when I say we, if the US doesn't have good statistics on it, there are other countries, Israel comes to mind, that have excellent statistics on these vaccines. And I'm talking principally about Moderna and Pfizer, that the protection is not what we were led to believe it would be. The good news about it is they do have a high likelihood statistically of keeping you out of the hospital and or dying, and particularly in the older population segments. So I think that was a prudent decision. Sticking a needle in the arm of a 4-year-old to protect them against COVID, as opposed to mumps or measles, I don't think is too prudent at this point, because excuse me, there have just been too many reactions to the drugs. So that's just my 2 cents. I'm not insisting I'm right, but I've tried to read a lot and be current on it.
Well, who cares what you think anyway? It's a minor incursion into the big discussion.
Okay, on that note, did you watch the Biden press conference?
I watched it on and off for maybe a total of 2 minutes because it was kind of like watching Soupy Sales, 50 years ago. It was, I just couldn't do it. And actually, what was worse is afterwards they had your friend Kamala or Kamala or whatever her name is, and oh my God, it was like, well, I'm not sure what it was like. I mean, it was absolutely unbelievable.
Well, let's talk Biden first. The man cannot articulate a complete, cogent thought.
Racist?
How is that racist?
Well, I don't know. That's the term I'm
He
reading from my Democratic.
the talking
So
points.
I'm responding to you. I'm kind of like a Jonathan Capehart on PBS. When you make a comment, I will throw out, something to respond to.
Biden starts with a subject and a predicate, which I got to give him credit for that. And then, much like a teenager says like, Biden says look. And then he goes off in another direction. So I took a few years of German. I recall in trying to learn German, you have to wait for the verb to come at the end of the sentence, and it's very confusing. Biden's very confusing because you never know where he's going. It's kind of a convoluted concatenation. Do you like that word?
Well, yeah,
Of looks.
Yeah, but to address your point, with Biden, you never know where the verb is.
Well, I don't know where his head's at. And the obvious, the easy one to talk about, and everybody is, it is what he said about the Russians amassing somewhere in excess of 100,000 troops on the Ukrainian border, with presumably, because why would you do that otherwise, unless it's just brinkmanship to negotiate some deals with the Western democracies, or the US in particular. But Biden made two distinctions. He basically said, if it's an all-out invasion, then he would apply sanctions and would punish the Russians that way. There was no talk whatsoever of a military response. But then he couldn't leave well enough alone. Then he said, look, and went off in another direction. He said, now, if it happens to be a minor incursion, the response would be different. It's probably something the U.S. and Russia could talk about and maybe figure out how to deal with it. So my analogy would be, and let's roll back the film. Let's say that the Imperial Japan, rather than striking Pearl Harbor, had instead struck San Francisco. They sent some warships up into San Francisco Bay and just did some bombing and so forth. of San Francisco, but left the rest of the US mainland alone. And let's say instead of Franklin Roosevelt having been president, Biden was president at the time. I guess under Biden's thought process, that would be dubbed an incursion. So not as big a deal as if you did kind of a Normandy style landing up and down the Pacific coast. I mean, the man was almost inviting Russia to do something on something less than a grand scale, and they could get away with it. And then what you have, in my view, is the perfect setup for the old salami technique. You pick a city and take it, and then you let the uproar quiet down a bit, and NATO, doesn't act with any force. And then maybe you take move another chess piece within the Ukraine, and you do a series of incursions as opposed to a wholesale invasion. Your thoughts, Mr. Griggs?
I think you put it quite well. I'm looking back on the military side of the thing. I guess what irritates me is that Biden always talks about there'll be consequences. And I'm going, okay, and even my wife was saying, well, what are they? What are we going to do? I mean, what's on the table? We're playing poker. I mean, what are the chips? I mean, are we going to do economic sanctions? Who the hell cares? Russia's been economically shot for the last 50 years. So that's probably not going to work. Firing rockets along the border of Ukraine, knock out 100,000 soldiers. That's probably effective. Whether or not anybody will ever make a decision on that, I would doubt it. So,
well, Putin took, we talked about it in a previous podcast, he took Crimea and he took Georgia.
Yep.
And brought them back under Soviet control.
Yep.
And sanctions didn't do a damn bit of good. So.
Yeah, well, I guess what bugs me personally is, Putin doesn't want Ukraine to join NATO. Who the hell is he to say whether they join or don't join?
Well, Biden in the press conference indicated it was because the question was asked, and to the credit of the press, they asked a good question. But he doesn't foresee the Ukraine joining NATO anytime soon, and in fact talked about that perhaps being a possibility many years from now. Now, I'm going to make a comment. You're far more the military expert, having spent a career in the Army than I. But I have thought about this, and I'm just going to bounce it off you. One among many downsides of the 20-year war in Afghanistan, which ended up being at best a draw, and then, of course, Biden's bungled withdrawal from Afghanistan. But I think, and I've read this as well, that America now has no taste for entering any kind of a war with the Soviet Union to protect the Ukraine. And I get that. But I would also say, having lost the war, because we did lose it in Afghanistan, there are probably other international situations that were they to develop, the American people would have no stomach for. And the reason for that is we had the most protracted war in our nation's history, and we didn't come out on top. I mean, it defied what you should do in conducting a war. You identify the enemy, you identify the issue, and you use overwhelming force to win and win quickly, and as best as possible to minimize casualties. But we didn't do any of that. So I'm not suggesting we should go to war with Russia over the Ukraine. I'm just saying that, you know, things like Afghanistan affect other possible strategic decisions we'd have to make. Right now, and I wouldn't even call it ironic. I'd call it I'd say it was to be expected. Three countries that Biden hasn't dealt with effectively: Russia, Red China, and Iran are all conducting together. It's a joint exercise of those three countries, naval war games in the Mediterranean off the Iranian coast. I mean, why do you think they're doing that now?
Is that a question?
Yes, sir.
Well, I kind of look at it like a club. And, you know, they all figure, well, if we all get, you know, there's strength in numbers, we all get together, you know, and then we figure out whether the United States caves, which history tends to show we do. And then you just notch it up, you know, a ratchet, and you just keep on pushing and pulling and incursioning until it becomes an invasion or whatever. I mean, I don't know how you would want to play a game like that, but that seems to be the way the game goes.
I don't even know if Germany, in its self-interest, has the stomach to push back on the Russians now.
Well,
David,
no, hold it, time out, because you touched on a point that's really important. You know, there was that gas line, and I was never in favor of it when they started building it, God knows how long ago. But, you know, with Germany and France, if Russia goes to hell in a handcart, or there are sanctions put on them, then basically Germany runs out of natural gas.
And Trump forewarned them.
Oh, of course.
Trump, you know, for those of you who can get past Trump's tweets and look at some of the very substantive things he did in his one-term presidency, he lambasted Germany when they cut the deal with Russia for natural gas and petroleum products in the pipeline you're referencing. And he said, why would you do that as a NATO ally? Why wouldn't you buy from the US or any other oil producing, natural gas producing member of the NATO alliance? Instead, you go to, you know, a potential arch enemy. And where I was about to go with regard to Germany is Germany has said if Putin invades Ukraine, they would stop purchasing fuel from Russia via that pipeline. And my thought is just a John Q. citizen is, hell, Putin's not an idiot. You know, he could tell Germany, hey, I'll sell you fuel at cost while I'm conducting my incursion. In other words, I don't put a lot of stock or credibility in what Germany's saying. I think much like what Biden's doing with sanctions, Germany's just waving that threat, you know, under Putin's nose, but Putin does what Putin wants to do. That's his MO. And he feels very strongly. There was a very good article in the Wall Street Journal this past week. Putin feels very strongly about all the territory that the former USSR lost, and wanting to regain some or all of it. And what he does with the Russian people in that regard is much like what Hitler did in going through the litany of Germany's grievances with regard to how Germany was impacted by World War I and the the settlement or agreement, the surrender afterwards. And he whipped that fervor up in Germany. So to have an addled president who can barely use the King's English without tripping over his own tongue go on national television and talk about invasion versus incursion, and like there's some nuance there. If you cross the border of a sovereign country with military troops, regardless of what your intent is, that's an invasion. Unless we've taken the word invasion and now applied a woke definition to it that whittles it down to possibly incursion. I'm being sarcastic on purpose here. I can't recall, I wish I could, but it was reported back when Biden and Trump ran against one another. A partisan for the Trump campaign said that Joe Biden in his nearly 50 years in the US Senate had never been right on a single issue of international relations, of foreign policy, I think is the way the quote went. And I think he's at it again. We've talked about this, Dick. Red China is, beating war drums of sorts again with regard to Taiwan. Iran is openly harboring terrorists, and they're back, working on their nuclear weapons program to develop a atomic bomb capability. And we have Russia, with troops and tanks on the Ukrainian border. And meanwhile, Biden gets home every weekend to Delaware and does these timeouts by 2:00 in the afternoon when he is in the White House. And even he admitted, thought it was interesting, after a disastrous first year in the Oval Office, he did say in the press conference, although he didn't concede that he had done anything wrong or he had had a bad year, he was willing to admit that his only problem is he needs to get out and see the American people and explain himself better. Which of course brings to mind what Rand Paul said, keep them locked up in a basement.
Yeah, but see, that goes back to what I said, 30 minutes ago, and that is that he needs to tell us specifically what's going to be done. I mean, don't talk about generalities, but I got to ask you again, because I don't understand, and I think maybe you do, but for our listeners, the question we got, what is this woke thing?
You mean define it?
Yeah.
I think it's a bit elusive by design, but basically what wokeness, I'll make a noun out of it, is all about is, and this comes, excuse me, right out of the radical left's playbook, is diversity, inclusion, non-traditional attacks on the American founding, the suggestion that the Constitution embraced slavery and that there's still slavery today. It's just masked in a different way. Wokeness includes the demand for critical race theory in the classroom. It demands taking, well, hang on, I'm trying to answer your question.
Yeah,
It
but
demands
hold
taking down
it.
statues.
I have yet, after all the reading I've done and everything, I've tried to figure out what critical race theory is. I don't have a clue.
Well, okay, real simple. It's just similar to what I just told you. It's all about white privilege, the imposition of white guilt, the paying of reparations, and making sure that every damn television commercial has Black people as the actors and actresses. And I'm saying that, I mean, that there's truth in what I'm saying, but I'm also being a bit sarcastic there. But critical race theory is all about imbuing young children in the classroom with the sense that white people got away with something and Black people and people of color really don't have any responsibility whatsoever if they've had any shortcomings in their lives, because it's due to white privilege. It's propaganda, Dick, and I'll give you how preposterous it's become. There are countless examples of what corporations are doing, but this week they announced that M&M's candy,
yes,
they're coming out with new ad campaigns that will be woke. So I don't know if that means the brown M&M will become a black M&M, and and I'm not. I guess that sounds sarcastic.
well,
But
no.
what are you doing?
Brown
M&Ms other than
M&Ms would probably work, and so I guess it would be to get rid of white M&Ms, but I don't know if they even have white M&Ms.
Well, it was Coke in the recent past that came out with a new ad campaign asking its customers to express guilt over what white people did to Black people. And all of a sudden, the sales of Coca-Cola dropped mercurially, and they threw the brakes on that. And as fast as that campaign was announced and put out nationally, it stopped, but they gave it the old college try. And there are too many examples to go through, in the space of our podcast. But a lot of corporations are lining up to be woke, and if you're lining up to be woke, all you're trying to do is genuflect before the radical left to make sure you're not offending these people.
Unbelievable. I'm just lost.
So anyways, we will see what happens in the Ukraine, but great wars have developed over both incursions and invasions, as you and I both know.
Yeah,
Because
that's true.
we read history.
Yeah, but it's hard to find history books anymore.
Well, the Russians right now are saying that if I've lost you, Dick. Oh, there you are.
Yeah, no, I had to clean up. I just spilled a bunch of Triscuits on the floor.
Ooh, I like Triscuits.
Oh, I love
Uh,
Triscuits.
One thing that hasn't been well publicized is Putin, among other things, has told Biden with regard to the threat of sanctions, I'm going to establish bases in Cuba and in Venezuela. Now, you and I know, because it's part of our 70 plus years of living, we remember well the Cuban Missile Crisis and how Kennedy, a Democrat, I mean, he had some terrible miscues, including the Bay of Pigs in his short presidency, but perhaps and also a very bad summit meeting with Khrushchev. But if he had a shining moment, it was the Cuban Missile Crisis. But I think that threat from Putin with regard to Cuba is probably something he feels he can throw up to Biden in this leftist Congress because they are who they are. And you know, I can't read the man's mind. I'm not an expert. I'm just voicing. I'm an American citizen who follows politics and has viewpoints. So I'm just letting people know that that's among the things Putin has countered with. So this could get into a real war of words. It's just a concern. When the American people, and now, because the question was posed amazingly by the American press that has been in Biden's back pocket, when the American people and the American media begin thinking that, hey, does our president have the mental acuity to handle his responsibilities as president of the United States? You don't have to be a rocket scientist to figure out that our major adversaries, which would include, in this order, I believe, Red China, Soviet Russia, and Iran, that they're reading the tea leaves too, don't you think?
Yeah, I think so.
And going back to the word woke, that's one of the concerns, and I don't know the extent of it, but there certainly have been lots of articles about our military's preoccupation with wokeness. You know, President Trump started the new arm of the military, the space. What's it called, Dick?
But the Space Command?
Thank you, the Space Command. And Biden, in short order, got rid of the top officer in charge of the Space Command. I mean, I've read a lot of reports that the military is far more preoccupied with things like inclusion and diversity and transgender rights and all kinds of things other than winning wars. And perhaps Afghanistan is somewhat of a testament to that. I don't know. But anyways, I think the press conference was a huge setback for a president already in serious trouble. And as for Kamala, you mentioned Vice President Harris. She reminds me of something I read a long time ago. I believe in a history book, but it may be true and it may be apocryphal. But after Lincoln was assassinated, they scoured the city of Washington, D.C., trying to find Vice President Johnson so they could swear him in, and he was nowhere to be found. And I say that because we can't seem to get, or Biden can't seem to get, Kamala to do any of the things he delegates to her. She's done diddly squat with regard to the border. I know she remodeled her office, and I know she went over to Paris to buy some pots and pans. And I think she made a trip out to California, probably to see family, because she was a politician in the Bay Area. Before, without a single vote in a primary, she ascended to be Joe's running mate. And Joe was asked during the press conference if he would have her on the ticket again in 2024, and he said yes. And the reporter asked if he had any follow-up comments, and he made some sarcastic comment to the effect, "Don't you understand what yes means?" Meaning, there's nothing more to say. That's certainly not what I've read. I've read the two are far apart, seldom talk to one another.
Well, I've read the same thing, that they apparently don't like him, and you've got one side saying bring her out, roll her out, and you've got other people in the party saying no, don't, just whatever. So who knows what she did. Her latest role is apparently damage control, but I'm not sure what she's controlling.
Well, I believe she's brought in a new communications director, and the reason for that is she's had a major loss of staff. People are bailing out on her right and left because they're thinking now that being on Kamala Harris's staff is bad for the resume as opposed to good for the resume. So a lot of people are running out the door on her. So she's blaming the press and saying that she needs better handlers to convey all that she's done for the country. And I don't know what magician they'll find that can sell that rabbit in the top hat. I mean, God, I've been watching. I not only watch presidents, I watch vice presidents. I mean, Spiro Agnew, Nixon's running mate, never impressed me much, but he did more than she's done for Biden. I mean, between the two of them, nothing gets done. I swear to God, Obama is the guy pulling the strings and Soros is the guy pulling Biden's strings. But I believe they're, to use an analogy from the Wizard of Oz, somebody is behind the curtain really calling the shots. And Biden just signs executive orders and tries his best to read from 3x5 cards or a teleprompter. He doesn't even use the traditional rooms in the White House for various meetings and pressers. They built a studio across the street from the White House. He's like Mr. Rogers in the neighborhood. anyways, it's not funny. I shouldn't be laughing, but
No, it's not funny. It's just so unbelievable that, I just don't understand it. I used to understand it, but now I've just lost whatever.
well, I'm among the people that I don't know if I would go as far as Donald Trump has, but I believe there was some hokey pokey with the election and the election results. Uh, I don't pretend to know the depth and breadth of it, but Trump was right in saying he went to bed at 2 a.m. and he had a substantial lead. And, he was always an early riser. When he got up at 5, the whole election had turned. And so I, for one, don't believe that Biden received 81 million bona fide legitimate votes from registered American citizens. But setting that comment aside, let's say it was a thoroughly legitimate election. Then I'd have to say to myself, not a thing that's gone awry in the Biden administration in year one should not have been known to 81 million voters. I mean, just in the debates alone, Trump hit him on virtually all the things that have occurred. The open borders, inflation, incompetency in foreign affairs, huge increases, or attempted anyway, in legislation that would, cost the taxpayers dearly. He told the middle class, contrary to what you're being told by Joe Biden, you will be impacted in terms of your wallets, all of which have come to pass. And you have been one to talk repeatedly about critical thinking. And I'm here to tell you, I think that 81 million people were duped. And that isn't even, without a hint of critical thinking. And if the people who voted for Biden point to the legacy media and say, geez, I was just trusting what I was being told on cable TV and Washington Post, the New York Times, then shame on them for not understanding how jaded those newspapers and TV news rooms are all about, and have been for some time, predating Joe Biden.
Well, that triggers a thought, and I wasn't even going to bring it up, but the Voting Rights Act, and you and I have talked, offline on this back and forth, and you finally made me wokeness on it. Again, I didn't understand what the big deal was, particularly not allowing people to drink water while they're standing in line. And you made some interesting points about, you could wear a Biden button and, pass out barbecue while people are standing in line. And that definitely gets you a few votes. The sad thing is, I think, and it's just another case of my major complaint, which is, explain it to me. If you're going to pass a law, tell me the pros and cons of the law. If you're going to change something, tell me what was wrong with what is and how it's going to get better when it isn't. You know, and that's what really irritates me. And we get sold this every day. The press, my favorite Jonathan Capehart, you know, just waltzes on about how, you know, it's limiting people's chance to vote and whatever. I've mentioned before, you know, that in every other major developed country, voter IDs are required. And all of a sudden it's determined that those prevent people from voting. Yeah, maybe if you're an idiot and don't get a voter ID, but you know, it's just, it drives me, batty. You know, here in Hawaii, in order to vote, I have to show an ID, and they check me off a list that I voted. I mean, what's wrong with that? It makes sure I don't vote 20 times.
I hear you. This is something folks need to know. Biden is moving illegal aliens all over the country and seeding them into communities. Certainly not his own neighborhood, any more than the Pope is putting quote unquote migrants into the Vatican behind the tall, thick walls of the Vatican. But you know what they're required for an ID to board a commercial airliner?
Who?
Illegal aliens.
Oh, no. What are they required?
Let's say they amass people in Brownsville, Texas, as an example. And they tell 30 of them that you're going to board that commercial flight and we're going to you know, send you up to Pennsylvania, as an example. What you have to do is you're given a notice from the Border Patrol that you've broken federal immigration law. That's what the Biden administration allows for an ID. I mean, they don't need a passport. They don't need a driver's license. They don't need any type of legitimate ID that comes from their country of origin. They don't need proof of vaccination. All they have to do is say, I was arrested by the Border Patrol for breaking federal immigration law. Oh, come on board.
Well, again, I haven't seen a source for that. And, you know, so
check out my
I can't even speak to it. But it wouldn't surprise me because the idiocy that we've talked about is just unbelievable. I mean, it defies logic, which you can respond to in 3 minutes because I'm going to turn you off.
Well, that's okay. I think we've covered some key topics today, but
in other words, we have made an incursion into today's issues.
that's a good one, Dick. Honest to God, folks, I know a lot of people, there are two things that absolutely turn them off these days. One is any discussion of the pandemic and COVID, because enough's enough. And the other is politics. I'm sure there's a core group in that 81 million who voted for Biden that would vote for him again. You know, radical leftist career people in Washington, D.C., you know, quote unquote deep state people. But I bet there's a large chunk of them that are kind of embarrassed. So they don't want to talk to their neighbors about it or their friends or family. And they just want politics to go away for a while. But I'm sorry, I hold you accountable. And that's because of what's happened in the space of a year to our country. It's an elevator ride to the ground floor. And it's like the cable broke. We're descending faster than we seem able to reverse it. And that's also a comment on the GOP. There are some superstars that I have the highest level of respect for. But you talked about it, I think it was last week, Dick. You know, if it was a GOP controlled Congress and a GOP president in the Oval Office, could we count on things to change dramatically? And I told you I had my doubts. So it's not a good situation. And I think it's not a cliche when Americans talk about taking back our country. We have a better chance of taking it back and a stronger will to do that than the politicians most of the politicians in Washington, and then the governorships and in the mayor's offices. So each of us in his or her own way have to do some small measure that the cumulative effect will wake some people up. And on that note, I hope you feel better, Dick.
Well, I don't know. My eyes are tearing up, but I think it's due to my ingrown eyelashes. Just another issue.
God, that sounds gruesome.
Yeah, well, see you next week.
Okay, enjoy your Cabernet there, my friend.
Thank you. Same to you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.